Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful idea from a sermon that's all about faith, purpose, and, well, the art of being ready for what matters most. Semper Paratus. It's a Latin phrase. Sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? It feels both ancient and, as we're about to see, incredibly relevant. So, what does it actually mean to be always ready? Okay, so Semper Paratus literally means always ready. But in the sermon we're exploring, we're not talking about being ready for a pop quiz. No, this is a call to be spiritually awake, to be constantly prepared for what the source describes as the ultimate moment, when God comes for us. Now, if we're supposed to be always ready, you gotta ask, what's stopping us? Well, the sermon points a finger at one major obstacle. It calls the complacency trap. You know, that temptation to just settle for good enough, to aim for a kind of spiritual mediocrity. The sermon frames this whole problem around a pretty stark choice. It says our hearts will always, always follow our treasure. So it lays out this comparison. On one side, you have earthly treasures, pleasures, jobs, awards, things that fade. And on the other, heavenly treasures, faith, hope, and love, things it calls eternal. It really forces you to ask, where am I actually investing my life's energy? And this quote really gets to the heart of the argument. Look, the point isn't that earthly things are bad, not at all. It's that making them the most important thing is a huge mistake. The source goes so far as to call it irrational, even delusional, to build your whole life on things that are, by their very nature, temporary. To make this idea crystal clear, the sermon uses a surprisingly modern analogy. It compares worldly goods to a medicine, something like Adderall. If you use it the way it's prescribed, it's a tool. It helps you function. But if you abuse it, it becomes this disabling distraction. And that's the whole point. It's our relationship with things like money or success that matters. Are they tools helping you on your journey, or have they become the destination itself? Okay, so if we want to avoid that complacency trap, what does a ready life even look like? This is where the sermon shifts gears, moving from the problem to the solution and giving us two key metaphors for how to actually live this out. So the sermon points to the gospel and pulls out these two ancient images, having your loins girt and your lamps burning. Now, I know they sound a little old-fashioned, but stick with me, because they represent two really practical, actionable mindsets. Let's break down what they actually mean for us today. First up, loins girt. Back in the day, this was the equivalent of us rolling up our sleeves or lacing up our running shoes. It's all about adopting a pilgrim attitude. The idea here is that life isn't about settling down and getting comfortable, it's a dynamic journey. It means not getting too attached to temporary things, living more like a traveler who knows they're just passing through, and being ready to move when God calls. Then you have the second image, lamps burning. This builds right on the first one. If you're a traveler on a journey, well, you're gonna need some light, right? This isn't just about having faith tucked away somewhere. It's about having an active, burning, visible faith. A lamp is meant to give light. The sermon says this is a faith that lights up the dark moments for you, and this is key, for others too. It has to be an outward-facing faith that shows up and serves. And all of this brings us to the big why. Why the urgency? Why all this talk about readiness? Well, the sermon frames it in pretty stark terms, calling it life's final exam, and really digging into the consequences of being prepared versus being caught off guard. So let's just ask the question directly, because it really clarifies what's at stake. What happens if you're not ready? According to the sermon, this isn't some test you can just cram for the night before. It's about how every choice we make, day in and day out, adds up and has eternal weight. To explain this, the sermon dives into one of Jesus' parables and lays out three different outcomes based on how ready a person is. For the servant who is unfaithful and chose to be ignorant, the outcome is described as permanent. For the one who was loving but still needed to be purified, there's a temporary purification, which the sermon identifies as what Catholicism calls purgatory. And finally, for the one who is watchful and ready, they go straight into the joy of heaven. The message is pretty direct. Your readiness matters. So, what's the grading rubric for this final exam? What's the one thing they're looking for? The sermon pulls out this incredible quote from the mystic St. John of the Cross, and it just boils everything down to this one thing: love. At the evening of life, we shall be judged on our love. Not just a feeling, but love in action. You might be thinking all this sounds a bit intense, a little heavy, but this is where the sermon pivots, arguing that being always ready isn't about living in fear. It's about embracing a life filled with an incredible sense of hope and purpose, starting right now. And the sermon holds up Abraham as the perfect example of this. Think about it. He gets this call from God to pack up and go to a place he's never even seen. He spends his life as a traveler, trusting the plan, with his hope fixed on something he couldn't see yet, a heavenly city built by God. His entire life was a journey fueled by hope. So this entire journey, this ready life, is really built on three core things. You've got faith, which is the foundation, that belief in what you can't see. Then there's hope, which is like your compass, always pointing you toward the goal. And then there's love. Love is the engine. It's the action you take, and it's the very thing you'll be judged on. And this is maybe the biggest takeaway of all. This whole mindset isn't just about what happens after you die. The sermon cites Pope Benedict XVI, saying that when you have this kind of hope, you live differently, right here, right now. It's not about escaping the world. It's about seeing it in a new light, because you've been given the gift of a new life already. And that brings us full circle. The sermon leaves us with one simple but really challenging question to think about. We're told that where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be too. So if you take an honest look at your life, your priorities, your passions, what you chase after, where is your heart headed? That's the ultimate question from this explainer on being Semper Paratus.